So I guess the first thing to start off with is the history, briefly, of labor unions and co-ops. And originally, the labor movement and unions saw the two as intertwined. Like, a good example is like the IWW did a lot of food cooperatives in the 19-teens. A lot of the unions in New York were building really extensive housing cooperatives because they kind of saw the relationship between pushing back against your manager or boss is the same as pushing against your landlord. But at a certain point, those two things split off into different movements, and they kind of were estranged for a very long time. The three big reasons for that is that there's some obstacles for co-op members becoming union members. The first one being that in a co-op, we're all managers, and that distinction of being a manager is something you can't have. You can't be a union member if you're the boss. So that's a weird blurring of that line that they don't get, and it's very difficult for a bureaucracy. There's some easiness on both sides because unions kind of feel like if the workers are already the owners, then why do they need a union? And it kind of threatens the idea of the need for unions. And then, on the other hand, some co-ops are reluctant to join unions because there's political culture that is often more bureaucracy and less progressive in terms of accepting women, people of color, and those tendencies within the labor movement.
So they elect to join the movement because of that?
What do you mean?
I mean, if you're saying the opposite.
They disidentified with conventional labor movement.
Yeah.
Because they have their community analysis.
Right. But co-ops and unions both are doing similar work in terms of the rights of labor and pushing up against capitalism, basically. But the reason why co-ops need unions potentially are that they offer a certain amount of resources that individual worker cooperatives don't have access to. So for instance, there's conflict and mediation services, discounts on insurance, they do pension and retirement funds, and these are things that one might begin to see federations of cooperatives providing as the co-op movement progresses, but those are things that might be a limitation now. Unions are set up to protect workers from exploitation by management and owners. This, you would think, would not be a problem, but sometimes it can be. Especially since the example here that Stacy gave is actually self-exploitation, which I didn't really understand. If you want to elaborate on that, but in some organizations, such as wages, there's usually a membership in workers, and then they hire an outside manager who's supposed to be accountable, but you can still have conflict along those lines. So some people do opt to do unionization, but I don't know if you had any points further on that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Sometimes you have a manager, sometimes you decide to hire a manager who's not a member of your cooperative, and in that case you definitely have that same relationship again. The concept of self-exploitation, has anybody ever heard of this before? You probably experienced it.
I experienced it.
Yeah. Self-exploitation is when you're breaking your back every day to get something off the ground, and you're not getting paid for it the way that you would if you were doing this for somebody else as a job, But you're putting all your heart and effort and all your time and all your money into it because you want to see it succeed. And sometimes it's just called being an entrepreneur. That's what most entrepreneurs do. But the idea is that some entrepreneurs are better set up to do this in the first place. So some entrepreneurs just cash out their trust fund and spend a couple of years trying to launch their business. And if they lose all of their dad's money, then it's fine. They just go back to school or something. It's no big deal for them. But if somebody who doesn't have much puts everything on the line and says, I'm going to really go for this, and I'm really going to try and launch this business, and beg, borrow, and steal everything I have to put everything into this and like work without getting paid and do all this stuff that would be totally illegal if somebody else was asking me to do it. That's what we mean by self-exploitation. So it's voluntary in a way, but it can be very negative, and it can happen to cooperatives too. And sometimes you choose to do it because you're confident that your idea is going to work, but sometimes you feel pushed into doing it. So it's just something to be aware of.
Okay. How would a union come into play there? Is that just a form of exploitation that you come up with?
I mean, a union has standards about things like working without pay. Like you'd be setting rules. You'd be allowing an outside organization to set rules about stuff like that. Like we're not allowed to work without pay, and we're not, and we need to pay ourselves minimum wages, for example. Well, that's not even a union thing; that's a law. But stuff like that, to protect you from yourself if you feel like you need it. Some people do.
Other reasons co-op members might join a union are the political clout and the organizing that the unions are doing. People that are in worker cooperatives often want to change the whole industry, and the solidarity that you can have through a union is often something people want to go for. Especially around like if you're trying to organize around pricing in your industry, that can really be something where a worker cooperative would do better working with a union. And some co-ops have found that being in a union opens doors to certain customers. Like the example Stacy was using in this is print workers. Often people want like that little bug on the end of their flyer or whatever that says like union made, and they only go through unions in terms of when they're looking for those services. Why unions need co-ops. In recent years, you may have noticed the labor movement has not done so well. So this is a way of kind of reimagining how cooperatives and unions can work together. It's a new base of people to work from instead of standard industries that may have deindustrialized. And then, so the examples that we have currently, or the most exciting one at least, is the United Steelworkers have started working with the Mondragon Co-op in Basque Country, in the north of Spain. But there's still obstacles to joining. So there's certain unions that have a better understanding of worker co-ops that you might have an easier time joining if you were looking to do that. The examples listed here: SEIU, United Electrical Workers, the Steel Workers who were working with Mondragon, United Auto Workers, and the Industrial Workers of the World. There's certain things that you can do to set up your own union, going through the NLRB, in case you want to go that route. It costs money to be part of a union, and those things will be deducted from your paycheck. And then, in certain cases, there's people that don't want to be part of a formal legal union. Examples might be like freelancers or people who are undocumented are looking to go through another means to get the same sort of economics of scale, especially around health insurance or legal assistance. So there's things like the Freelancers Union, the Boston Worker Alliance, which is a membership of unemployed and underemployed workers who try and create jobs and gain access. And then there's the National Domestic Workers Alliance, which is a lot of people that are doing a lot of self-employed work or go through an employment agency. And so those are the basics. It's kind of a new model, especially for the steel workers working with Mondragon in terms of unionization. And hopefully it's something that both will push in a new direction and hopefully reinvigorate both of them. But yeah, sorry, that was a lot of talking at you. Do people have questions?
Just to add one thing, unions can also be one more layer of protection for democracy, right? Some co-ops use that as, like, if our bylaws don't work and there's still some marginalized member owners of our co-op, well, you have a union to fall back on and to advocate for you. And it's not the ideal situation, right? Because then there's the conflict that we were talking about earlier, where you haven't fixed what's really wrong in your co-op agreements and things. But it is one more layer. If there are power dynamics that your internal agreements don't and your bylaws and things like that don't address, then the union can be one more resource for the person who's feeling marginalized or feeling they're not getting what they deserve in a co-op.
And also, like, some co-ops use them for their benefits. I mean, it's a lot of benefits. Like, for example, if you're unemployed and you're in a co-op, like, if you have a co-op and business is good in summer but bad in winter and people have to go on unemployment like in any other businesses, if you're a member of a union, you just call and say, wait, I went on unemployment. They fill out your paperwork, they take care of that, and you start getting your paycheck. But if you're not, you have to spend hours and hours and then the paperwork, you don't know that, like, the procedures. So that's one. Medical insurance, usually their packages are a lot bigger, or the 401ks, they have a lot more structure to do those things. So, like, if you're starting and you don't have the capacity to do all that stuff, you just can't rely on the union.
Has anyone ever been a member of a union before, or are you now?
Like the song.
What?
Are you now, or have you ever been? It's like a union song.
Start us off. Okay. Nobody? I have. Sorry?
How was it? What was your experience with it?
Good question. I used to work for Harvard for the School of Public Health. I had like a clerical job, a secretarial job there, and I was a member of AFSCME, the American Federation of Service Clerical
State and something.
Clerical
It was like state and municipal.
State and municipal employees, yeah, something like that. And it was fine. I tried to be active. I went to meetings. There was always somebody in the back of the room complaining that it wasn't democratic enough. And I was always wondering about that because it felt pretty democratic to me. And I was like, if you just stop complaining about how undemocratic it is, we can participate.
I know.
Yeah, but I learned later that this guy was part of a political organization that was like trying to radicalize our union, and it wasn't going that well. But it was really okay. I mean, I like radicalizing stuff, but the union itself was very open.
Because you left the job.
Yeah.
The nurses union in Worcester, they have and they're really strong, and they had a lot of publicity. I think it was like the late 90s or early 2000s because they fought against
Yeah, well,
a lot of people started I remember I was a little standing out with them and bringing them hot cocoa because they went on strike for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were able to make a lot of victories through that.
Well, I don't have any experience. My aunt was in the union. She's a nurse. Well, not in the union. She's part of the union, whatever. She complains about it. She just seems so happy to go to bed. Try not to listen to she complains a lot, but she's required to be in the union.
Yeah.
I think some jobs, like teachers, nurses, stuff like that, you're required to.
Yeah.
So she's just kind of mad that she has to pay for it, but just use it.
It can be controversial, and not every union is super cool. The ones on this list are probably the cooler ones. And I think that there's a lot of good stuff you can get from being part of a union. And I would encourage you to look into it. I wouldn't necessarily say you 100% have to do that, or it's really going to make sense to you, the unions themselves can get really big, and they can, like any other organization that gets very big, they become protective of their own power. So,
The
I mean,
Carpenters Union also
yeah.
I mean, Carpenters Union is not just in Worcester, but the political organizers in Worcester have done a lot of work to build solidarity with undocumented workers. So now the Carpenters Union will stand out in front of like clients who haven't paid workers.
Oh, we didn't know much.
They're like another cool union.
Wow, that's
They-
great, because I don't know what's the cool unions.
Yeah, they did a bunch of demonstrations downtown in front of like the new apartments because there were clients who hadn't paid their contractors.
Yeah, that's better. And actually, like, the funny story of the Carpenters Union here is like the executive director right now, he used to have a co-op.
Really?
He didn't make it. He's gonna be in the co-op. Oh no, he's not gonna be. He wants to be.
I'll give you one story, not to, I mean, this is just it's like a warning story. My dad is actually the CEO of a hospital in Rhode Island, in Newport Hospital. And this didn't happen in Newport, this happened in another hospital. But he told us that like, they were having a hard time attracting people to one certain class of jobs. It wasn't nurses, but it was like nurses assistants or something like that. And they wanted to raise the pay rate for that group of people to attract more and better people to this job. And the union said, no, wait, you can't do that because you have to wait until we like demand that. So he was like, my union won't let me raise these people's wages. He's like, I really want to pay them more, but the union says we have to like wait and kind of stage this whole fight about it so that the union could say that this was like a benefit that they won from the management. And he was like, I gotta wait a whole year to raise their wages, you know. So it's just, I don't think a union, I'm not gonna say that a union is an organization just like anything else. Some of them are really democratic and awesome, some of them are not as democratic, and you should just be really critical and careful about which one you align yourself with.
So what did he end up doing?
I don't think he could do anything, I think he had to wait.
He waited? Why didn't he just put out a memorandum to the people who would have had a pay increase and say, your union is preventing me from doing this?
I really
Because that
don't
would
know.
be union busting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Putting the workers against the union.
Yeah, I don't know the details of it, but he was quite frustrated by the situation. And I'm sure there's a lot of unions who would say my dad was a total jerk too, and they're probably right too. Anyway.
Where are we sitting?
We are going to have a video chat with Sarah from a bookkeeping cooperative.
It's called ABC, the book.
But she hasn't connected yet.
Oh, okay.
So we're plugged in and ready to go.
She didn't
Time is our appointment, okay?
I don't have a phone number. She doesn't know. What's that?
So what time are we supposed to like start?
6:45.
We can do our break now instead.
Oh, can I make an announcement?
Yeah,
I just wanted to introduce Jessica, who I brought with me. Or yeah, I actually let her introduce herself and why she's here. She wanted to meet all of you.
Hi, my name is Jessica. I am recently a Clark grad. I'm still working on my MA paper though, and because I changed my topic, and I'm really interested in learning more about worker cooperatives, specifically how they can create more sustainable communities and help immigrant workers. So I'm from New York City, and that's been something that's been happening in each borough. So I'm really interested to learn more about that. And now that I'm back in Worcester, I want to see what's happening on the ground here and see how either I can help